Shanti and good evening, good morning. We have many different time zones, so hello to everyone. And this is our Wednesday evening look at the day's Murli. And today, in the Murli, there was a sentence that I think is really important to go into in detail. And I think I will really focus this entire session on that. And that is that Baba says the first act of creation is to create the subtle region. And within the subtle region, you have the Trimurti. So we have an image of this, so we can bring this image up and keep it on the screen for just a few minutes so that you can see this. And the faces of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shankar are identical. There's also an image that we have which shows the three worlds, and you're familiar with that, which is an oval-shaped image which has the material world in blue with the picture of the earth with the kalpa tree in it below. And then in the middle, there are three stripes, one white, one yellow, and one red. And then in the top part of the oval form is the soul world, which has a background in red and all the little souls in little, slightly yellowish little stars with the picture of Shiv Baba at the top. And they're all arranged in the form that you are familiar with, which is the same form as the form of the kalpa tree, which is inverted or upside down picture. And I would like to take up this subject. And I think that many of the people on this session do also have a background in Christianity. So you may be familiar with the book of Genesis, where the story of the creation is given. And it is actually considered to be real. But when you think about this in terms of the spiritual knowledge that Baba is teaching us, you can see that it's absolutely symbolic and that we need to understand the symbols. So, first of all, let's look at this concept of the statement that the first act of creation of God, incorporeal Shiva, is to create the subtle region. And many people ask this question. It's quite a mysterious subject, the subject of the Trinity or the Trimurti, and the subject of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shankar, the three levels of the subtle region. And so I would like to take this session to try to explain it to you all. And the subtle region is sometimes called the mind space, at least by me. And this is because it is possible for God to project images into your mind. And this can be done through vision or through dream or through explanation. These are the three ways. And in the very beginning of this extraordinary historical event, which we call the Confluence Age, when incorporeal God entered into the body of Brahma and began to speak. And this continued 80 some years. And now we have everything that was spoken, and it's important for us to sit with it and look at all the symbols, the hidden meanings, and understand the depth of it. But this reference to this first creation of the subtle region remains quite mysterious to many people. And the first thing that Shiv Baba does, which was historically around 1936 or 37, somewhere in there, where he actually gave visions to Brahma Baba and pulled his intellect, his attention to the supreme region, to the subtle region, and caused him to become aware that something is happening, something very extraordinary. There is a description of Shiva, a name of Shiva, which is Vishwakarma. And there are many, many names of God in all the different religions. So Vishwakarma is called the architect of the world. And so these three forms, the form of Brahma, the form of Vishnu, and the form of Shankar, correspond to architects' drawings. And they are images which are symbolic. They are icons which have a lot of meaning. And all of the descriptions that we have in the Murlis are explanations of the different icons and images, as well as myths and legends and other references that are to be found in particular in India and also in other parts of the world, which all are memorials that there was such a thing as the creation, which was done by God, but nobody knows who is God, and nobody knows how this was done. And so the scholars and sages and saints of ancient India used to say that no one knows the knowledge of the Creator and the creation. And so Baba very often mentions this, and he says, I am the Creator, and I'm giving you the knowledge of the Creator and the creation. And it's given in quite simple language, but when you uncover the veils of the language, you can find out the depth of what he's talking about. So I just want to skip over to the Bible, and I think the similar story of creation is there throughout the Abrahamic religions, which includes Islam and Judaism. And so an expression that people with a Christian background would be familiar with is this expression, in the beginning was the Word. And then there's another expression that God said, let there be light. And nobody knows what word was said, nor to whom, or if there was anybody to hear it. And let there be light was interpreted as let us switch on the sun so that there is light. And it was also said that when God came, the world was in chaos and it was empty and without form. And so all of this is generally interpreted in a totally physical manner, as if it is an actual reality. and it is not really considered in terms of its symbolic value, but in fact, it is extraordinary symbolism, which Shiv Baba explains to us. So the word of God, what does God say? He gives the introduction of himself and the explanation of the beginning, the middle, and the end of the world. So it's more than just one word. It's a lot of words, which were spoke over a long period of time. So in the Bible, it is said that all of this act of creation takes 6 days, and then on the 7th day, he rested. This is also symbolic. And when God speaks, he speaks 7 days a week without any rest. But there is a meaning of resting also. And that is that after God has spoken and everything has been accomplished, then he will go into retirement because he is no longer needed, and humanity continues very well for a long time until things go wrong, and then people pray to God, call on God, and then eventually, when the right time comes, he again comes and gives the introduction to himself and the beginning, continuation, and end of the creation once again. And so in the Bible, it is also said that at the end, God will come again. And at the end, it's also called the time of reckoning. So there are all of these explanations, but people haven't really been able to put them all together. So we have various snippets, and they take the form of beliefs and blind faith, and they are represented in all kinds of different imagery. But people were not able to distinguish what is symbolic and what is real. So the symbols and the realities all got mixed up. So when Shiv Baba does his first act of creation to create the subtle regions, what is that exactly? So the subtle regions, as I mentioned before, comes in 3 dimensions. So we have the material world, which we are all familiar with, and there is the soul world, which is the world of light, the world of nirvana. But the 3 levels of the subtle regions, the white, the yellow, and the red, refer to 3 different types of visionary experiences that he will give to people, or that he gave to people. Because in the very beginning of this, if you imagine for a moment, you're God, and there's all these human beings who don't understand anything at all, and whose third eye is totally closed, and you, as God, do not have a physical body. And so you can't communicate to people in the normal way as we communicate to each other through our bodies. And so what to do? So his way is to begin with very powerful visionary experiences. And so in the beginning of this extraordinary historical moment, this was what happened. There were visions. And it's not exactly clear exactly what visions Brahma Baba had, but some were spoken about. And in particular, he was given the vision of Vishnu. So Vishnu is a central figure of the Trimurti, and Brahma was a Valbachari Hindu. That means he belonged to a sect of Hinduism which believes in Krishna. And so they focused on the Gita, because in Hinduism of that time, it was understood that the Gita is the jewel of all scriptures, and it is spoken by Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield. And the Gita is positioned in the large epic poem, which is called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is longer and bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey put together. It's very big, 100,000 couplets. And the Gita is 700 couplets within that. And the Gita is the knowledge that God speaks. And the Gita is different from other scriptures insofar as it is spoken by God in the first person to another person who's all the time arguing. And it is listened to also by a third person, which is Sanjay, who had the gift of clairaudience and clairvoyance so that he could see what was going on at a distance. And he was reporting that to other people who were around him. So this is the only record in any scripture of God talking to someone and being observed by someone else, which is very important because in all the other religions, the prophet, the founder of the religion, had a visionary experience, heard the voice of God, but nobody else did. And then that person told it to other people as a personal experience, but it was not observed by anyone else. So this is very significant in terms of theology. So this vision of Vishnu that was given to Brahma was a very powerful vision. And according to Hindu belief, a devotee who is doing many different forms of worship over a long, long period of time, the belief is that if you do this degree of spiritual practice that is the highest level, then you will be rewarded by a vision of Vishnu. And the belief was that Vishnu is God. So he had a vision of Vishnu, and he thought that that was a vision of God because that's the beliefs. And he was a person who was very religious. He studied a lot. He read the Gita every day. He was a businessman, and he also had 12 gurus, one after the other. And he thought that his guru had given him this vision. And so he was very overwhelmed, and he thanked his guru for giving him the vision. But the guru said, no, neither have I had any such vision, nor am I capable of enabling you to have a vision like this. So what is happening to you is out of my range. You're on your own. And so, this sort of experience and set of experiences that was happening to Brahma Baba was very difficult for him to figure out. So he traveled to Benares, Kashi, which is the place where all the gurus get their educational qualifications in Hinduism, the University of Benares, and they become the doctors of philosophy of religious knowledge from there. And he had a friend there, so he stayed with his friend, and there he got more visions. And he saw paradise, he saw the end of the world through very severe calamities and global nuclear war and many things like this, which were unbearable for him. And he also saw intense bright light. And these are also referred to in different scriptures of Hinduism. And so he knew about this, and he was trying to put it together. And for a while, he thought that, he had become an enlightened individual, like a sage or a saint, but he couldn't figure it out. And also many, many people had visions of him as Krishna. And nobody could figure it out. But this is the beginning. The first acts of God is to give people visions. That means to carry the soul, to pull the soul into trance and enable the individuals to see something which is so powerful that it couldn't be ignored. It could never be forgotten for their entire life. And it forced them to pay attention and do something, but what, you see? So this was going on for some period of time before Shiv Baba started to use the body of Brahma and speak through him. And when he first started to speak through him, Brahma Baba couldn't figure out what was happening and who this was. He knew there was someone who was speaking to him in trance and who was speaking through him, but he didn't know whether he was speaking or this other one was speaking. He didn't know who that other one was or really what was going on at all. But he was absolutely overwhelmed by the intensity of the religious experience. And, in all the religions, the founders of religions also are known to have had very, very powerful religious experiences of different types. And for example, there is the story of Moses who saw the burning bush, which wasn't getting consumed, so just a very bright light. And generally speaking, the people who recount their visionary experience of God is about God as light. And so this is fairly widely accepted that the form of God is light to all those who are in theistic religion. So there are other religions which are non-theistic religions, like Buddhism, for example. It's a non-theistic religion. And Islam and Judaism, they just focus on the being of God and no images. Whereas in Christianity, there are images. There are Christ, the Virgin Mary, different saints, many images are there. So that is like that. So when Shiv Baba was creating the first creation of creating the subtle region, what he also had to do was to explain what's going on. And he also showed over a period of time to the gathering of people that gathered around Brahma Baba, many, many different images. So the picture of the Trinity that we just saw, the Trimurti that we just saw, was one of those visions that was given a few times. The vision of the Kalpa tree, the vision of the cycle. And the picture of Lakshmi and Narayan was created by Mama Jagat Amba Saraswati. And the picture of the ladder was created by a gathering of brothers and sisters, which is focusing on the 84 births of the trunk of the Kalpa tree and the different forms of bhakti that emerged and gradually went from very pure bhakti to very gross bhakti through from the Copper Age to the Iron Age. And then, during what is called the Bhatti, the first 14 years, and many, many visions. Now, one very important thing that happened in the history of Brahma Baba is that Shiv Baba decided that I have to explain very clearly to Brahma Baba what's going on here. And so he, for about a year, he entered into the body of a young sister and had direct conversations with Brahma and told him, you are Brahma, I am Shiva, and I am using your body to give the knowledge of the creator and the creation. And I'm using your body because you are the one who is the soul of Krishna, the soul of Vishnu. Vishnu is not God, but Vishnu is the icon, the image, the symbol of the combined form of Lakshmi and Narayan, which are the first emperor and empress of the Golden Age, which is also called heaven or paradise. So this is the creation. The creation of God is the world of paradise, and which is also a kingdom. And he explains all the details of the kingdom and so on. So this architecture of the creation has to be done in three formats, you can say. And it is also known in some detail of Hindu practice that there is a threefold effort required in order to become an enlightened person. And so this Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, Shankar, shows three aspects of the spiritual effort. So Brahma is the founder and father of the Brahmins. And so Shiv Baba says, I enter your body and I give birth to children through your mouth. That means to say, those who hear these words of Shiva through the mouth of Brahma and who recognize what's happening and who recognize themselves. And when he says through the mouth of Brahma, I am Shiva, I am the father of all souls, I am your father, and you are my child, and I am adopting you through the mouth of Brahma. And one who recognizes it and says, yes, that's adopted. And so born through the mouth of Brahma means you are adopted through the words of God, through the mouth of Brahma, and then your identity is changed because you are no longer belonging to whoever you were, your biological parents are, but you have understood that your real identity is a soul and that you belong to God, but you're still alive. And so you have a life as a Brahmin, and you then become a student of God. And so he creates children who he then immediately makes into students. So he then becomes the Supreme Father, the Supreme Teacher, and the Supreme Satguru. Satguru is the one who takes the soul to the state of liberation, the world of nirvana, and purifies the soul, removing all the impact of sin and deterioration of the soul that happened through the cycle of 84 births. So all of this is represented by the image of Brahma, and so the world, the new world, is established through the vehicle of Brahma. So this is one aspect of the architecture of the world. And people were able to go in trance and were carried into the white area of the subtle region where they would see the perfect form of Brahma, which is called Avyakta Brahma. And they would also see the perfect form of everyone. And so all the people who were in that gathering came to understand that there exists a form which can be seen in the subtle regions of your final form, your perfect form. And at the current moment, you're in your imperfect form. You have passed through 84 births, you have become just a basic, ordinary human being, and you have no idea what your births have been or how many births you have had. But he says, I'm called you because you are the oldest souls. So Brahma is the oldest of all, and who was the highest among all human beings at any time in history. And he was Krishna, and he was Narayan, who are then worshipped as deities in the path of Hindu Bhakti. And then Mama Saraswati, who was also a daughter of Brahma, who was also born through the mouth of Brahma, was identified by Shiv Baba that she is Radha, she becomes Lakshmi, and the two of them become the emperor and empress of the golden world. And what is also needed is the whole kingdom. It's not just two people. There's lots of people there, but not the population of the world that we have now, which is somewhere around, I don't know, going on for 8 billion. But he said that the population at the beginning is just under 1 million. And so that's very, very small. And that this land, this civilization that is being created through this knowledge exists in physical form in India and around the area of Delhi, because the populated world, for 1 million people, you don't need all that much land, and people are not distributed all over the globe. They are grouped together where they can have a whole kingdom with everything that you need, and buildings and transportation, and it's a very, very high-tech place, extraordinarily wealthy and beautiful, and all the people are pure and like yogis. And so this is what is being created. So then people were also shown visions of who is in heaven and what heaven looks like. And so there, the trance experiences where the soul would be pulled in their subtle body to see in the yellow area of the subtle region, which is where you see all the visions of heaven. And there were a few people in the very early days who were pulled into trance for a couple of weeks at a time. They would remain in trance the whole time, go to sleep, get up, take their bath, eat, and do all the things. But in the experience of being this first birth golden aged deity person, and they would kind of act and demonstrate what it's like, so that the other people who were not in trance would see this, they would observe this. And so all of this had to be shown, because you can't explain something like this to people who don't have any reference. And so this first creation of God in terms of being the subtle region is he had to show people, show them what is Brahma, show them what is their perfect form, show them what is himself as the incorporeal supreme being speaking through the mouth of Brahma. Everyone was being taught how to change from ordinary mortals into the immortals of the scriptural fame, but nobody'd ever seen living deities, living beings who were like that. So they could experience it in visions. And then the red area is where people would see what the world of nirvana is like. because he had to teach them meditation. So he had to teach them, I want you to, he would say, become soul conscious. That means detach yourself from your body, and using the power of your mind, go to the soul world, which was experienced in vision as a golden red, all-pervading light. And in that, there would be these little lights in the form of an upside-down tree, which was exactly the same as the form of the kalpa tree, which is the form of the embodied souls, the souls who are who they were. Their identity of their first birth is given on the kalpa tree. So souls would come down one by one from the beginning of the cycle all the way through to the end. And it was one-way traffic. Once the soul came, then they started to take your births. And so people would have a mental picture of what this is like. And those who had had the trance experience then painted pictures of what they had seen. And out of this grew the diagrams, which were and are still used to explain what this information is. And all of this came out slowly, slowly, slowly. And I think by around 1964, all the knowledge had been given. So it took from 1937 to 1964 for all of it to be given. And the first period was trance, an explanation of what people were experiencing in trance. It was very complex, many different kinds of visions. And so Shankar, the third figure of the Trinity, represents yoga, represents the highest stage. And so Shiv Baba had to explain to people that what I want you to practice is to be completely naked. That means to be completely bodiless. This is the meaning of naked. And the figure of Shankar is shown doing tapasya, that's intense meditation. And normally the figure of Shankar is shown with the third eye open. And there is a belief that when Shankar opens his third eye, then the world is destroyed. And what is meant by this is that as a normal person who is embodied and you're connected with the material world through your sense organs, and you experience the material world in your mind as solid images and experiences and sounds and sights and smells and tastes and textures, temperature. So all of this is reality as perceivable through the sense organs. And people who are what he calls body conscious, they are in that consciousness of perceiving reality through the sense organs, and they're limited to material reality. Whereas he wanted them to be able to be in the material reality and at the same time separate. So the image of Shankar is the image of the person who has transcended their body and who has gone beyond the perception of the material world and is able to perceive the being of God, who's able to perceive what the world of non-matter is, and who's able to stabilize themselves independently of their body and then focus their mind on the being of God and pull the energy of God into themselves, which purifies them, transforms them, and fills them with the light and power that they need for the next period of the cycle, the renewed cycle, and the next series of the maximum of 84 births. And so this is called yoga. And people who are studying this need to understand that who the creator is, and that the creation is not just limited to the material world, but there's also the world of the subtle regions, which is where all of these images and symbols are to be experienced. And it's also where you experience, in the end, the whole process of being called to account, the time of reckoning. You will see who you are, who everybody else is, and you will have to be called to account for your pure and impure karma. And so that is a scary time for people who have a lot of impure karma, but a very good time for people who have very pure karma. And so this whole package that is contained in the subtle regions is then explained in detail over the course of many, many years, as Shiv Baba started to speak on a daily basis through the mouth of Brahma. And there were many, many stories and things that happened during that whole period of time of 85 years or something. And so here we are at a point where we are able to understand all these things pretty clearly without having to see them in vision. Because whether you understand something or whether you see a vision of it, actually he says, okay, you can see a vision of it, but you won't understand by just seeing a vision. You understand by having everything explained to you. And so now very few people are given visions, because there isn't really any need for that, because we have the images, we understand, we've been studying for many, many years, and so it's all very clear. And so I wanted to take this up because I think that many people, you're familiar with the image of the Trimurti, and you know that it is establishment through Brahma, sustenance through Vishnu, destruction through Shankar, but maybe it's not all that clear. So establishment is specifically about the information and the practice. And so the Brahma is shown wearing white, which is a symbol of purity and a symbol of simplicity. And so you live the life of a Brahmin, quite simple, quite basic, and you study all these things, and then internally you are being transformed. Externally, everything remains the same, but internally you are acquiring the characteristics of Vishnu, and these are becoming sanskars. Sanskars, so powerful, so solid, that they endure for many, many births. And so he teaches us pure karma, he teaches us yoga. So these two things create the sanskaras of the golden age. And then there is a slow loss of power and virtue through the whole cycle until eventually we return again to our current position. And so this creation has this durability, which is represented by Vishnu. And Vishnu is the single figure representing the two, the male and the female, Brahma and Saraswati, as Lakshmi and Narayan. So every person has to become a perfect balance of masculine and feminine, and so that you become effectively androgynous, because you will take 42 births as a male, 42 births as a female, or less, as as people arrive later in the cycle, the number of births they get is progressively less. But the ones who come at the beginning, perfectly balanced and perfectly perfect in every possible way. And then Shankar is the symbol of bodilessness, the symbol of absolute detachment from everything that created impurity in the soul. So it represents the purification process of yoga, and it represents the destruction of ego. It represents the destruction of the effects of negativity, either that you did to anyone or anything, or that was done to you. Either way, it contaminates and corrupts the soul. And so the process of yoga is the purification. So these three symbols show the whole detail of the process of the creation. And so this is why it is the first thing that he makes, the architectural drawings of the world. So I will stop there, and let's just have a moment of quiet together, just a moment to be quiet and reflect on this extraordinary image of Brahma, Vishnu, Shankar. Shanti.
At the moment, there's no question posted, but maybe you can clarify a bit of, or maybe not clarify because you already clarified so many things. But one question here is, what triggers a vision, and does vision emanate from one's memory and hence influenced by one's religious inclinations?
These things are, I think, actually projected into your mind by God, because you cannot really access memories that are that far back, that many births ago, because they are in your soul, no doubt, but it's locked, you know. You don't have access. And so he will activate an area of your soul, but you cannot activate it yourself. And it might be something that is connected with your experience in religion 50, 60 births ago. And that was a very, very different state of humanity, a very, very different state of religion in the world. And so he will enable you to sometimes see something that you may have seen in the Golden Age 5,000 years ago, but unless he activates it, there's no way that you would ever be able to make contact with it. And so it's, I think, important to say this is something that's given to you by God, and it can only be given to someone who knew it. And you don't know who you are, but God knows who you are. And part of what happens to a person who receives that kind of vision is that it sort of awakens their sense of who they are. But at the same time as all this, you get all kinds of false visions. And so that's an added complication, which is another reason why the tangible reality of the explanation of the visions is actually better, because it's, you know, it's reliable, it's black and white, ink on paper, and yet these things did happen, and even until relatively recently, in the last 40, 50 years. And so there are people living today who experience things like this, but most of those who were there at the beginning have now passed on. And but we have all the descriptions.
There's a question here. I'm read it to you, sister. Is when we try to meditate, should we try to connect with Shiv Baba in the subtle region or soul world? Should we try to visualize Bab Dada when trying to feel the experience of meeting God that is visualized? Brahma Baba's angelic body, which Shiv Baba in it, and then try to have a heart-to-heart conversation.
I think probably not, because there are many Murlis in which he says, now you know all this information, remember me in the soul world. So it's really a matter of directing your mind to God, you see, because just as when you are in connection with another human being who may be in another country, and you can think of them in your mind and they will feel something. This is kind of a telepathic connection. Nowadays, everybody uses internet communication devices, so telepathy is a bit not much in use, but you understand what I mean by that. And when you are communing with God in your mind, it's effectively a telepathic communication between yourself and God. But all of these things get interfered with by imagination and people kind of going off in funny ways, you can say, because there's all sorts of things like that. So what's really the very, very best is to communicate with God. You're talking to God. You're churning the knowledge. I really do emphasize the importance of churning the knowledge, because he's talking to you through the Murli, and you study that. And this study and going into the depth of what he's saying actually connects you to him. And that is a very, very reliable way to connect with God through the knowledge. And that's what I would recommend, because there's so many games of the imagination and all of that which get in the way, that you don't really want to get caught up in that stuff if you don't have to. I don't see why there's a need for that. But people get attracted by those things, which is actually a sort of a distraction. And so I think it's very important when you're going far, far beyond, like he says, but to also be very grounded, because otherwise you can easily go off track easily.
Sister Denise, the question here is, the subtle region is one of the first creations of Shiv Baba, and most of the events there are also quite subtle, with visions, trance, etc. This may appear mystical, and so faith plays some role in accepting these. And how does that differ from the visions, apparitions in Fatima or Fatima? You know, your comments, Sister Denise.
Yeah, well, one thing is, he says from time to time, there are no events in the subtle regions, no events. So a person who gets a vision, sometimes he will say, you will get visions according to the drama. And this may be quite an interesting way to look at the different visions of Fatima and other people. What Moses experienced was a vision. And people who are great spiritual masters, they often report different types of visions. And these visions are described by Baba in the Murlis as something that is, he gives it to them and it's fixed in drama. So you have to work with that paradox, because it is fixed in drama, that's one thing. It is given by him, that's another thing. And both of them coexist, and they're both happening at the same time. It's a paradox that you need to sit with. But you see, nowadays, the question of visions is not really the main thing that's going on. But why I am talking about this is because it's important for us to understand it. To understand what he's talking about when he mentions it in the Murli. And you don't need to experience it in order to understand it. You just have to process the information and use your inner capacity of intelligence to comprehend it and to conceptualize it, which we are able to do because we have the full description. And if by chance you experience a special experience, which may happen occasionally, one thing that a lot of BKs do say is that they see little points of light. And sometimes Baba had said, oh yeah, you might see those, and that just a signal to let you know that, you are a soul. And it's like a little thing, but it's not like a big overwhelming vision, and that can happen, but very rarely, and it will happen for an important reason, and it does happen, but mostly not.
Last question, Sister Denise, based on the timing. It says here, I had a very strong fear triggered today, very potent. The magnitude was so large that it almost made me dizzy. It felt ancient. It had to do with a perceived threat to my two angelic boys who met you during Diwali last week. My husband has a different understanding of reality and doesn't value spiritual life. I need to raise my children with him. I would like to hear your advice.
Well, there are many, many different kinds of people, and there are also many people who are very antagonistic to matters of spirituality. They're very caught up in the other view of life, you can say, very materialistic and sensual based. And I think that when you meditate, especially when you do your early morning meditation, it's a very powerful time. And that is the time when you extend a radiance which covers your children as a kind of protective force. And also they will look at you and how you handle all the things that you handle and how you hold your own spirituality. And they will evaluate because, they may be young at this time, but they will remember this for their life, and you're really showing them in a very discreet but yet potent way what spirituality is in terms of love and consistency and subtlety, and you give them the feeling of security and personal power in the face of opposition. And this has a very, very powerful impact on your children, definitely.
One question is, do we have to be in the awareness of playing our part with Baba all the time?
Well, he says, as much as you can, be soul conscious, as much as you can, be in the feeling that he is with you and be with him, and make that very real, though it's very, very subtle. And this will help you to experience that the tangible reality is not as real as it presents itself as. And this is why he says it's drama, it's a film, it's like a film. And though he is intangible, but yet he's more real than the tangible. So you work with that and try as much as you can to hold it. You can't hold it all the time because it's so subtle and you get pulled into the material all the time. But do your best, and that is a very good practice.
Last question is also related to connecting with Baba. What's the best way to figure out if my channel with God is open with two-way communication on, that in any way I haven't blocked it? Is it how my day feels like, how light I might feel during the day, and how I am aware throughout the day?
I don't think you should evaluate yourself on the basis of feelings that come and go and assign too much meaning to them, because it's like weather, it's sometimes sunny, sometimes cloudy, sometimes rainy, sometimes cold, sometimes hot. It doesn't change who you are. And so who you are and your relationship with Baba, the relationship with God, and your karma and your perception, your interpretation of events is very much to do with how deeply you understand these things, and much more so than the variations of feeling that happen. And it's a lot of people, they think, oh, if I'm feeling good, it means I'm great. And if I'm feeling bad, it means I'm a bad sinner. It doesn't. You need to flex with these variations and understand yourself according to your motivations and not according to how you happen to feel from moment to moment, because the vibrations vary a great deal and you are impacted by all sorts of things that are invisible. And it's not just microwaves and Bluetooth and that stuff, which is already something that we know impacts people, but just the vibes of what's going on in the world around you, you will pick it up. It doesn't mean something about you. It's the weather, the atmosphere, you feel it. But don't judge yourself by what's going on in the atmosphere.
Thank you, Sister Denise.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining this evening.